Hey, welcome back. Do you have a history? Do you have a past? You sure do, and so does your county. And guess what? Somebody's been keeping track of it for you. All those things that have happened to Putnam County for all these years have been recorded. And there is an incredible person in charge of those records. My name is Vin DeQuino. Her name is Sarah Johnson. Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
It is an honor to have you here.
Well, it's an honor to be here.
You are the keeper of our past.
I am. We're a little-known county office. We're over on Marvin Avenue, 68
Yep.
Marvin Avenue in
Old
Brewster.
brick building.
In the records
historical
center,
itself.
exactly where the county clerk's overflow records are, in that building in the back. And we're on the bottom of the ridge line. Marvin Avenue runs parallel to Main Street in Brewster, but we're just on the...
So you're like behind the library.
Exactly, exactly.
Yep.
And our offices, we have a very small staff, but we're, and I'd like to give
a very good staff.
a very, very good staff. I am blessed with an extraordinary staff. Sally Cipher is our deputy historian. She was the county historian in the early 1990s. She still comes in as an RSVP volunteer.
Sally is a wealth of information.
She is. She's lived in Putnam Valley for about 50 years. She's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Jen Cassidy also works in our office, is equally as amazing in different ways, a technological wizard. And we have a couple of great volunteers. Liz Allison comes in on Wednesdays, and Greg Amato comes in on Tuesdays. So we've got...
And Greg Amato was a former police chief.
Yes, of Carmel, absolutely. Again,
Yeah.
long-standing member of the Carmel Historical Society and very
And
active community member.
We've lost a couple good people, Kathy Wargis and Chris Mucciello.
Sure,
who were
Christina
there for many
Mucciello,
years.
and Reg White, absolutely.
Reg White,
so we've
yeah.
had some staff shifts, but so we're doing the best we can. We've had to restrict public hours a bit to Monday to Wednesday, but give us a call. We're there.
So basically, what is a county historian?
Right. New York State is unique in this way. Governor Al Smith, in the late 19-teens, 1919, 1920, this legislation goes back to, created these positions in part to trace what happened to the returning GIs from World War I. And that has been very useful to what we'll talk about in a minute about this World War I commemoration project that we have going on this year in terms of celebrating the 100 years of the U.S. entry into World War I. So those records were kept both at a local level, but also because of a man called Judge J. Bennett Southard. He was running a local version of that. And there was a statewide initiative going on too. So we have the benefit of both of those records in Putnam County in terms of the history of Putnam County's activities during World War I, both military activities and some civilian stuff that was going on here as well. So we're interested in and actually going to start doing some outreach, some public outreach to commemorate those celebrations. We'd love for people to take a look in their family photos, family records, and see if there's, if they've had people who were involved in any way, military or civilian stuff too.
Don't realize the stuff that's in the attic.
Absolutely.
Sometimes a photo is worth a million words.
It is. It's really true. So some of this job, again, has to do with preservation, but also interpretation of the past. So the one thing that I would say, that I say always generally when I speak in public is for people to keep, to gather and collect, and particularly with regard to photos, to label things, because you will forget. And the people who will know the people in the photographs.
So when you have these photos, turn the photo over.
Absolutely.
Name the place, name the people.
And
the time and date.
Really, at this point in time, scan them. Because as we were just talking about, I mean, you see tornadoes come through areas and,
and then all of a sudden they disappear and the people don't realize.
It's gone.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Also, God, I just heard a wonderful thing. I was at a school yesterday.
Mm-hmm, sure.
And they had a speaker. Mm-hmm. And one of the little girls, the speaker said, your grandparents are wonderful resources.
Absolutely.
And you should talk to them. And
Yeah.
this one little girl said, yes, in great-grandmothers. He says, oh, do you have a great-grandmother? She says, yes, she's 100. He says, 100 years old. He said, are you talking to her? And she says, uh-huh. She tells me about when she was a little girl.
That's
He said,
great.
are you recording it? She said, no. Record it, he said. Don't let it get away, honey, please.
Exactly, particularly because everybody's phone
reason-
or or tablet does that now.
Every time we lose
Right.
an octogenarian, we lose some of our history.
Those stories, absolutely. And again, it's so easy. There are, StoryCorps has an app that you can download that makes taking those oral histories with family members really easy. And I think it also makes those intergenerational conversations make things like family holidays that can be fraught on any number of levels much more meaningful if you can get people talking about photographs. And I think photographs are a great entry into a family's past.
It's amazing. I have a wooden suitcase
Sure.
that my grandmother
Nice.
carried
over?
to Italy when she was a little girl. And my father took that suitcase and preserved it
Nice.
by putting all of the family photos in it. And I was fortunate enough to inherit
Nice.
that box. And I have pictures of my great aunts. I
Sure.
have pictures of my grandfather. I never met him.
Right. Right.
I was a year old when he died.
Of course.
And I can see him. I can see what he
Yeah,
looked like. I can see if I looked anything like him.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's invaluable.
Or if you've got the family nose,
That's
or
right,
the
family
eyes,
nose.
or the
Sybil
the
Ludington.
chin.
When I did all these research on Sybil Ludington, we found a picture of her grandson. And he was famous in his own right.
Sure.
Well, we don't have any photos of
No,
Sybil.
no.
So the closest
Cameras
we could
didn't
come
exist, right.
is they'd look at this picture of
Relatives.
the grandson and
Sure.
wonder if maybe she looked a little like him or he looked a little like her.
Mm-hmm.
So in your archives, you
Mm-hmm.
have archives as part of.
We do.
Talk to me about that.
Not all county historians have a collection of records, but we actually do. We have two different collections. We have government records, which are, generally speaking, they're records that had been used by other county offices until some point in the 20th century. Sometimes they've got the more
Right.
current stuff in their working offices now, but we generally have things up until about sometimes in some cases the beginning of Putnam County when it splits from Dutchess in 1812 to about 1920 or 1930. That material is in our office, but we also have in our office what's called the Historians Collection. And that's a much broader spectrum that's where we have things like 19th century business ledgers from local businesses.
Wow.
And we have a huge collection of photographs. We have probably over 5,000 or 6,000
So many of these businesses
photos.
that came and went,
Absolutely.
you have photos of.
We do.
Wow.
We do. One of the things that has been my mission in the not quite 2.5 years that I've been in this job is, again, to try to get that information more accessible to people. So we've been trying to scan things and to improve our internal record keeping systems so that more things are digitized and or they're just better organized so you can type it in. And again, we're moving toward that. That's a longer term goal because it's a lot of work behind the scenes, but I think when we again, as we gradually move in that direction, we just got late last year some collections management software that will make that a lot easier. So we'll be able to get more stuff scanned and again attach some images to things and gradually make that more available on the web.
I've come into the office and I've seen
Sure.
people from the office with old books and sitting there. Man, I tried to read some of this stuff. It's difficult.
Absolutely.
But the information.
The amazing
is
thing
amazing.
is exactly the early county clerks were, the onus was on their handwriting. And it can seem a bit daunting, 19th century handwriting, and some of it is much easier to read than others of it. But after you get going, you do kind of get into a groove.
You do get into it a little bit. It's very different. I mean, I remember when I was doing the book on Sybil Ludington, I was fortunate enough to find pension records that actually had her signature on them.
Sure.
And records that told about her husband's best friend. Her sister wrote a letter saying, I was at her wedding, and all these wonderful letters. At first, I looked at them and said, "Are you serious? I can't even read this." But you're right. After you look at it for a while, you get to understand that like S's look
Or
like
if you,
F's.
yeah, right,
and
exactly.
so
If
many
you
different
compare
things.
letters, yeah, exactly.
And you start to get the hang
Or
of it.
sometimes it also helps to read those things out loud, because you get, like you'll
Yeah, and you get a sense of the gist of what it is.
exactly. Even though language was a lot of times much more formal, and sometimes in the 19th century a lot more florid.
Yes.
And there's a formality to language,
Yes.
particularly like again in correspondence. Correspondence was much more formal and kind of flowery.
Yes. And it's difficult. So so that's all really very important. I mean, sometimes one sentence,
Absolutely.
you see something and you've seen it 100 times, and then you realize it's a key to more information.
Sure. No, we've got a great example of letters that we have in our collection is Seth B. Howes of circus fame over in Brewster wrote letters back to his brother in Brewster
Wow.
in the 1850s. And we have all of that correspondence and most of the envelopes too.
So in addition to photos, if you find old letters
Absolutely.
in your attic,
Call
oh my
us.
God, because
Call
any
us.
reference could
Email
open
us.
a door.
Absolutely. Shoot a quick picture with your phone, email it over to us.
Yeah,
and
especially these days with
particularly
phones and things,
before
so
you
easy.
put anything in the garbage.
Now,
give us a
you
call.
also have some of your archives are in temperature-controlled.
Yes. Yeah, we have the benefit of having an archives room that is temperature and humidity controlled.
Wow.
That becomes really important, again, just in terms of the longevity, the preservation of things. And again, we're trying to make some improvements to that by doing things like moving the newspaper collection that we have, moving things around and shifting so that we can accommodate the newspapers, and just some basic things like that. Our map collection, again, we need better organization of our map collection. And we have started to, a great company over in Cold Spring has done some large-scale scanning of our maps.
Wow, that's
So
great.
there's a couple of very large maps, the O'Connor and the Reed map from the 19th century, from 1854 and 1876. And we now have, and they're available on HRVH,
Wow.
our regional digital scanning initiative brought to us by one of the New York State Library Councils, which is fantastic because they provide for us all of the back-end technical part of that. But those maps are there now. And the amazing thing about those maps is not just how Putnam County changes, but they have recorded, if you subscribed, if you paid to have your name on the map, they have people's houses. So
Wow,
you can,
really?
so if you're doing old house research, those are the first places that we check. Yeah, they're kind of like old-fashioned or kind of plat books existed for a while, but they were more agricultural and regional in America. But they actually denoted where people owned property, and particularly farms and that sort of
And
thing.
connecting, oh my God, connecting names.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much information.
Absolutely. And again, it's in really interesting places. We have been helping the Kent Historical Society and the town of Kent do some work on their District 3 schoolhouse on Farmers Mills Road. And that schoolhouse, again, I know you've said
I
you've
know, I
taken
bring
school kids,
busloads of
exactly,
kids
which is
to see that
fantastic.
schoolhouse.
Exactly. And luckily they got. There it is.
There it is. Oh,
exactly.
whoa.
Absolutely, that's fantastic.
That's amazing. I bring the kids. Behind that
Yep.
are two outhouses.
Exactly.
And the kids get such a kick.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, this one little kid, it was precious. I said, yeah, and here's the outhouses, and the kid goes, wait, in the wintertime too? I said, do you have to go to the bathroom in the winter? He said, yeah. I said, well, that's where you went.
That's where you went.
He was
Exactly.
like, oh my God.
Absolutely. So we've been helping them, and they, to their credit,
They're wonderful. The Kent Historical Society
They
has been
got
keeping up a lot of.
Yeah, they got a donor to. They had a lead paint problem on the outside of that building, and they got that contained last year. So that was woo. That's a real.
Yeah. So last year we had to skip it.
Right. Exactly.
But this year we're going again in April.
Because we got that problem solved. But our office has been doing some work with one of the archaeology professors at Vassar, April Bija, and we are hoping to do a dig there with her. She's gonna do a dig because we're hoping to get that property on the state and national historic registers. Very characteristic that area is of. Again, the pre-reservoir period of Putnam County's history that was largely agricultural.
Yeah.
And literally that area dries up when the streams are diverted for the reservoirs. So if you look at the history, particularly of Putnam County's history in terms of the mills, mills were what ground the grain that was grown here. They cut the lumber, again, all of the trees, forestation in this area. And they also did some textile processing in the 18th century. So the mills we don't necessarily tend to think of mills in a contemporary sense, but they were really the center of agricultural communities. And there are so many of them here because of the wetlands, because of all the streams. And that becomes, again, a really critical mass part of how complicated our story gets when New York City begins to buy up that land to protect
Red Mills.
Absolutely. And again, you can kind of work your way around Putnam County in that regard.
Now, I have to ask you.
Sure.
When I was doing my research, I had incredible help from the Carmel Historical Society, the Kent Historical Society, the Putt Valley Historical Society.
Absolutely.
Tell me about these community historical societies. Do they have anything to do with you as the Putnam County historian?
They don't in an official context.
But you work together as a
Exactly.
team.
Yes. They don't get funding from us. And again, I would like to say that I approach this job and take my job as the department head very seriously in terms of finances, because I spend money like a taxpayer. And I am, as I told you before, tighter than the bark on a birch tree when it comes to that, because I think that our tax dollars need to go a long way. They are hard earned. So we
not to mention that it makes your job so much harder.
Very carefully spend the resources that we have, exactly. But we also are, again, confronted with the issues like preservation. And so, like I say, that's why we have had to upgrade, especially some of our computer equipment, get better scanners that are faster.
It is so important.
But we act as an advocacy role for the historical societies.
You meet with them from time to time.
Absolutely, we work really closely with them.
It's so important. I mean, I've said this so many times, people are probably tired of hearing it, but I'll say it again. Every time we do not teach a child of today about his yesterday, we're stealing some possibilities from his tomorrow. It's incredible.
Yeah, and there's so many ways kids can get involved.
So much of our past could crumble in dust.
There are historic cemeteries that kids can get involved in. We've had scout projects again where kids have gone in and done some work, some projects in cemeteries. We just actually had an Eagle Scout fix a number of do a refurb job on a number of the historical marker signs from the kind of 1920s to the most of those signs were put up from the late 1920s until about the 1950s. And then again, some of the local historical societies or town historians, depending, added to those signs or did some refurbishment work over the years as well.
When I was doing hauntings of the Hudson River Valley, I was trying to get information on George Denny. George Denny had a sister, and I was trying to find out who she was, where she was, what her name was, where she was buried.
Absolutely.
Well,
and
believe it or not, Putt Valley.
Sure.
When I went to the cemetery where she was supposed to be buried, the gravestones were blank. the writing had worn off.
Yeah.
And you couldn't tell who was buried there.
Right.
You know, Putnam Valley had a little box.
Had a list.
With the list and
Yeah.
the names.
And that's why preservation is so important.
It's
crucial.
so,
Yeah. Not just for us in a contemporary sense, but additionally to, again, to save some things. This is actually a photograph that went our version of viral on Facebook. Like us, we're Putnam Historian on Facebook if you are so inclined in social media. But that photograph is Babe Ruth actually playing a game of pickup ball with some boys in Putnam Valley.
Ruth?
Babe Ruth came and summered in Putnam Valley.
Oh my God!
And Dan Ritchie, the Putnam Valley town historian, tells the story that there's still a rock that kids put their baseballs on for good luck.
Oh my
because
God.
of that. So that's really exciting. Yeah, I just brought some images of recent projects.
This has a wonderful story.
The dugout canoe story is pretty amazing,
Yeah,
I have to say. It was the initial story that we got from this about this particular artifact. I come from a material culture background, so what that means is I have studied and taught at the college level about the history of everyday life stuff.
You have a PhD.
I do.
Woo!
Don't hold that against me. But I'm not a Native American specialist. And the story that came with this canoe, or the kind of the lore,
This canoe, by the way, is available
oral
at
histories.
It's
in our office. We'd love to find a permanent home for it, but we're still working on that.
All right.
So the story that came with this, when it was donated to what is now the Putnam History Museum in Cold Spring, or the old Foundry Museum, it was donated by a man called Charles Zurhorst in the early 1970s. They didn't have any paperwork about this. The story went, at least based on the write-ups in the 70s when it was exhibited with other Native American artifacts. The story went that it actually had been dug out of the mud because Native Americans would bury these canoes, old wooden canoes, to winter them. It had come out of the swamp, the Great Swamp near Patterson. And the story was that it was from circa 1620, which would make it pre-European contact, which was fairly extraordinary. So I felt we had a duty to the artifact to get it tested. So with donation money, and I'm thrilled about this, we have we take donations, and we got last year actually in this particular mission our largest to date donation, which was a single donation of $500. Cost about $1,300 to wood
Wow.
samples from 2 places on the canoe, because again, the old part has been dug out of these dugout canoes. To just see when it was from.
Yeah.
I figured we owed it to that.
Yeah.
And what a great story, right? Well, it turns out the carbon dating suggested that it gave us a 75% chance that the canoe was from between 1805 and 1910, which means that it probably wasn't made by Native Americans at all, and opens up a lot more questions. My gut instinct is to say that it was probably made by somebody doing an experiment. You know, can we make one of these?
I mean, the possibilities are endless. It could be Colonel Luddington could have been. He was around then.
We don't know. That's the really interesting thing about primary sources in research.
you just never know.
Sometimes they bring up a lot more questions than you can answer. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But our office, again, you had mentioned doing some genealogical research. We help lots of genealogical researchers. Last year, we literally doubled the number of physical visitors that we had to our office. I just brought a smattering of things since it's tax time. This is a photo of the tax collector's book from the town of Kent from 1857. Wow. The interesting thing, well, interesting to me because I'm a dog person, but there was a dog tax in the 19th century, again, also connected to the agricultural economy, so that if a dog killed your sheep, if my dog, say, killed your sheep, there was county money to make good on that, or town money to make good on that. And it continues on with us in some ways in terms of the annual registration of dogs.
No, there's also like town records.
Yes.
In those days, I mean, I saw some of those. It's like it was illegal to park your horse at such and such a place.
No, absolutely. There's absolutely fascinating things. We just actually started working on a project at the request of the county judges, because there's a statewide initiative, a New York statewide initiative about the history of the court system. And so Sally Seifer and I have been going through these crazy old legal records from the 18 teens and 20s and 30s so far, because we started at the beginning when we spin off from Duchess. And literally I found this, I was just in awe of this will, because you could tell the backside of when the man was finishing this will that his handwriting was just, it was very weak. Wow. He mentioned a friend's name that is escaping me at the moment, but the will was neither dated nor signed. So I mean, again, sometimes primary sources do give us a lot more questions than answers.
And there's facts. I mean, when I was doing the story on George Denny,
sure.
I mean, it's amazing. Every time you go to the courthouse,
right,
and you go to the county records building,
right,
you're walking by the very place where George Denny was hanged.
Right, exactly.
The gallows stood right about that entranceway.
Exactly. Near to where and New York State, or Putnam County is also unique in that we have one of I think two historic courthouses, the original courthouse that's still being used. Still in practice. Wow. So it is, that structure in and of itself is really amazing.
I try to tell the kids of today, you're bored? Oh my God, go chase history. And you can now, thanks to Jimmy Walsh, a Boy Scout, Eagle Scout, he did a project where he put the signs for Sybil all around her route, so that you can start at the statue in Carmel.
Right.
And actually follow it around. What a wonderful family Sunday thing to do.
Yeah.
The parks, the museums.
Absolutely.
There's so much rich history
Absolutely.
in Putnam County.
And we are, our offices actually have been working on, because Sally Seifer developed some driving tours.
Oh, great.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're, one of the projects, it's another one of the projects that is on our decks, is to take those and just shift the format. Get them so that they can be, to connect GPS coordinates with the sites, and to get some, some nice narration going and that sort of thing.
All right, what I'd like you to do right now
is
I'd like you to look at that face, because this is the face behind Putnam County history.
Well, thank you.
Sarah, I don't know how you got to us, but thank goodness you did.
Well, thanks, Ben.
We appreciate all you're doing for us.
Sure.
Keep doing it. You're a real live person.
I am.
You can be found in Brewster.
Absolutely. And I just want to do one quick shout out. If anybody has any material, family material related to
photos, diaries, books, newspapers.
Absolutely. Anything. We're specifically looking this year for women's suffrage and for the, again, U.S. entry into World War I. But we'll take anything you have.
If you have an uncle, a cousin, a brother who was in World War I, you've had that picture in your collection, they can use it.
Or you had a great aunt that rolled bandages.
Good. Yep. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you here. Our treat. And your treat too.
Thanks, Ben.